kind of horror story that, for me, is the scary. It doesn't happen in some old abandoned castle.
Right.
It happens in places that look totally aggressively normal, like white tiled floors, fluorescent lights, maybe some fresh laundry drying on a rack.
The banality of evil, you could call it, or in this case, the banality of the supernatural. It's always so much creepier when it invades a space that's meant to feel safe.
Exactly. And today we are diving deep into a story that is just a perfect example of that. We're looking at an account that went viral back in 2018. It all started from a thread by a woman named Pute. And it's all about her time living in a boarding house, a kozan in Cipete, South Jakarta.
And just for some context, Cipete isn't some remote village. It's a trendy, really bustling part of the city. You know, lots of coffee shops, traffic, young professionals. It's the absolute last place you'd expect a gothic horror story to just unfold.
That's what makes it so gripping, because when you look at the photos that Pute shared in her original thread, the house looks fine.
It's completely unremarkable.
Yeah. It's mundane. A standard room, a window facing the front, some modest furniture. It looks like 1,000 other boarding houses in Jakarta. But according to Pute, this specific place was a magnet for a spiritual war that she and her roommates just got caught in the middle of.
It's interesting you use the word war, because usually with these stories, it's a haunting, right? A single spirit maybe attached to a place.
Yeah.
But going through the research here, this feels more like a territorial dispute, and the humans are just collateral damage.
We're going to unpack all of it. The mimics, the possessions, the really mysterious neighbor in room number 2, and this entity they called Barbara. But we have to start where Pute started, which is just with the vibe of the place. So she moves into room 4, upstairs. Downstairs, there are 3 other rooms. The amenities are great AC, water heater.
All the comforts.
But she says right away, the silence there felt heavy.
Heavy silence. You hear that description a lot in these cases. And psychologically, often points to hypervigilance. You move into a new place, you're alone, and your brain just starts scanning for threats. It amplifies the quiet until it feels oppressive.
That's a fair point, but then how do you explain the copycat? This is the part of the story that, it made me want to go check my own door locks.
Okay.
So Pute has a roommate. Her name's Kina. One night, Kina is in the bathroom. She hears the front door unlock. She hears the heavy thud of a bag being dropped on the floor.
Okay. Standard sounds of someone coming home.
But it gets so much more specific. Kina hears the wardrobe door slide open, and then, and this is the detail that gets me, she hears the sound of a stick broom, a liddy broom, sweeping the mattress.
Oh, that's specific.
Swish, 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 swish. And on top of that, she hears Pute humming a tune.
The humming just adds this layer of casualness to it, like everything is normal.
So Kina calls out, "Tech," which is Pute's nickname. No answer. The sweeping continues. Kina finishes up. She opens the bathroom door, fully expecting to see Pute. And the room is empty.
Wow.
Stone cold, empty. Nothing's moved. The bag isn't there.
So, okay, immediately, if we put on the skeptic's hat, we have to talk about expectation bias.
Right.
Kina knows Pute's routine. Her brain expects Pute to be home. And when you're under high stress or you're really tired, and remember, they worked in media production, which has notoriously long hours, your brain can essentially autofill the auditory gaps.
I get the autofill idea for like a door creak or something vague, but the sweeping, a liddy broom has such a distinct scratchy sound. And the humming, that feels like a lot of creative work for a tired brain to do.
It is a very granular hallucination. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Usually people report hearing a generic bang or their name being called, hearing a whole cleaning ritual that suggests Kina's brain had that pattern deeply encoded. Or, if we lean into the story's version, something was mimicking Pute perfectly to try and lure Kina out.
And the real kicker. Kina texts Pute, "Where are you?" Pute sends a photo back. She's stuck in gridlock traffic at the Simmanji Bridge, miles away. There is absolutely zero chance she was in that house.
So that sets the precedent. Whatever this thing is, it knows their routines, it knows how they sound.
And it escalates pretty quickly from there. There's another incident, the hello incident. Kina is smoking by the open window, 2nd floor. It's late. Suddenly, this clear, loud female voice just screams, "Kin," right in her ear.
Not from below.
No, not from the ground, from the air right next to her head.
Auditory hallucinations like that, exploding head syndrome, things like that, they feel terrifyingly real. But what's interesting here is the shift from a passive haunting, just noises, to an active interaction. This was a confrontation.
And the confrontation really ramps up when the catalyst arrives. Enter Diane. Diane moves into the room across the hall. She's a traditional dancer, and she tells the group pretty openly, Hey, just so you know, I'm an indigo. I attract spirits.
Oh, wow. Talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, from a group psychology perspective, Diane is like a walking contagion of fear.
How so?
Well, once you introduce someone who says, I am a magnet for ghosts, every single shadow in the house suddenly becomes a demon. You've primed the whole group for mass hysteria.
That's what I thought too, until the physical attack started. Kina is walking to the kitchen and she hears this guttural, heavy male growl right in her ear. She sprints back to her room, totally terrified. Diane just looks at her and says, you bumped into him. He's mad you didn't apologize.
So Diane is now the interpreter for the environment. She's building the narrative for them.
But she's not the only one reacting to it. Let's talk about Winnie. Winnie is a neighbor in the next room. She's packing up to move out, which, smart move.
You're very smart.
But the stress seems to trigger something. The roommates hear this awful crying and laughing sound. They rush in, and Winnie is arched on her bed, completely stiff. Her body is rigid, and she is scratching her own neck so hard it's turning bright red.
Psychogenic seizures, or conversion disorder, can look exactly like that. Extreme stress manifesting as a physical loss of control. The scratching is a physical manifestation of wanting to get something out.
And Diane, who is this petite, really small woman, she climbs on top of Winnie to pin her down and starts reciting prayers. And then Winnie vomits. But this isn't normal vomit. Pute describes it so vividly. It's a clear liquid filled with white streaks.
Okay.
But the streaks aren't liquid. They look like white worms, and they aren't moving.
I spent some time thinking about this detail. White, non-moving worms. If this were a movie, they'd be wriggling, right? That's the horror trope.
Right. Maggots or something gross like that.
But non-moving is biologically strange. I mean, gastric acid is clear. If she'd eaten something starchy, like noodles or rice, maybe it could look like white streaks. But the roommates were adamant it looked different.
And here's why I don't think it was just noodles. Later in the story, Diane herself gets possessed. Same violent shaking. Her boyfriend, Ferris, comes to perform an exorcism. And when Diane finally expels whatever's inside her, she vomits the exact same thing.
No way.
Clear liquid. White, static, worm-like shapes. Two different people, same bizarre biological event.
That repetition is much harder to explain away. I mean, unless they had a shared meal plan or it's a specific visual archetype of cleansing they both believed in. That is a very strange coincidence. It suggests a pattern.
And speaking of Diane's possession, we have to talk about how violent it was. This wasn't just moaning and rolling her eyes. Pute describes Diane slamming her head against the wall, jedug, hard.
Whoa.
To the point where her forehead was blue, bruised, and bleeding.
Self-injury is the line in the sand for me.
Yeah.
People who are faking a possession, either consciously or subconsciously, they usually have a preservation instinct. They won't actually give themselves a concussion.
Right, they'll pull back.
To bang your head until it bleeds suggests dissociative trance state, where pain receptors are just completely suppressed. Whether you call it a spirit or a psychotic break, the danger in that room was real.
And in the middle of all this chaos, you have Ferris, Diane's boyfriend, the Pawang, or handler. This guy is the definition of unbothered. He walks into a room where his girlfriend is smashing her head on a wall, and he just lights a cigarette. He sits down, exhales, and calmly asks the entity, "What do you want?"
That calm is actually a technique. In a lot of traditional Indonesian spiritual practices, the handler has to stay dominant and grounded. If you panic, you lose control of the entity. The smoke is often used as a kind of medium or a grounding element.
And the entity, speaking through Diane, claims the boarding house is dirty, crowded, which leads us to the source of the crowd, the antagonist of our story, the mysterious woman in room number 2.
This is where the whole story shifts genres, doesn't it? It goes from a haunted house story to a black magic mystery.
It really does. So room number 2 is downstairs. The tenant is a total recluse. Pute notices a Raja, a talisman with mystical script on her door.
And the smell.
Diane claims that whenever she walks past room 2, she smells enior. That's a specific Indonesian word for the metallic, fishy smell of blood.
Olfactory hallucinations, phantasmia, are often linked to the temporal lobe. But in the context of Indonesian folklore, enior is the signature scent of the kuntilanak, or other spirits associated with death.
So the theory that starts bubbling up among the roommates is that this woman is practicing Pesugihan. For our listeners who might not know, could you explain what that means?
Sure. Pesugihan is essentially a transaction. It's a ritualistic pact, usually involving dark magic, to get instant wealth or success. But there's always a cost, a sacrifice, an offering, a tumble. If the roommates believed this woman was doing Pesugihan, they weren't just scared of ghosts. They were scared of being used as spiritual fuel.
Which brings us to the red bison. This is maybe the most visual, just insane part of the story. A neighbor named Reza, who wasn't even part of the main group of girls, by the way, he happens to peek into room 2 when the door is slightly open.
And what he says he sees just breaks the mold of a standard ghost sighting.
He doesn't see a shadow person. He sees a creature, a massive red bison standing as high as the ceiling. Its eyes are giant. And he said the room felt impossibly small for something that big.
See, this is where I struggle. Pareidolia is seeing faces or shapes in random patterns that usually results in human-like shapes. We are hardwired as a species to see people. To hallucinate a red bison is so incredibly specific.
Right.
It's not a common Indonesian horror trope like a pokong. It feels ancient, almost primal.
And Reza didn't just see it. He says he heard a word projected directly into his head. Not a voice, but a thought that wasn't his. The word was malapetaka, catastrophe.
Telepathic intrusion. That is the terrifying detail. It implies the creature wasn't just existing there. It was warning him or threatening him.
So now the roommates are starting to realize, okay, it's not just random ghosts. There's a hierarchy. They bring in a friend, Bang Uda, who has spiritual vision. He scans the area and he drops this bombshell. He says there's a kingdom of spirits in the neighborhood. But specifically, and this is so weird, he calls it a Christian kingdom, led by an entity named Barbara.
This stopped me in my tracks when I was reading the source material. Indonesia is a majority Muslim country. Local spirits usually follow local religious lines. To identify a Christian kingdom implies a faction, a foreign element. And the name, Barbara, it sounds so bureaucratic.
It's so mundane.
It's not the Dark One or the Shadow King, it's Barbara. It makes the spirit world feel unnervingly organized.
And Barbara was not a friendly neighbor. When Kina goes home to her parents' house, miles away from Cipete, she tells them this whole story. As soon as she says the name Barbara, her own house starts shaking, beds rattling, walls banging.
The name taboo. The idea that just speaking the name is enough to summon its attention.
Okay, I know you're the skeptic here. You can explain away the bison as a shadow. You can explain possession as stress. But we have to talk about the speaker. This is the smoking gun for me.
I had a feeling we were heading here.
The unplugged speaker incident. Pute and Kina come home to the Kosan late one night. The house should be silent. Instead, they hear this deafeningly loud music coming from Deanne's room.
And it's not pop music or anything, it's Javanese gamelan.
Right. For those who haven't heard it, gamelan is a traditional percussion ensemble. It's beautiful, but in a horror context, it's often associated with rituals or the arrival of something supernatural. So hearing that blasting at 2 a.m, nightmare fuel.
So they go into the room.
They burst in. Diane is there. She's wearing a scarf, her eyes are closed, and she's dancing with these strange, slow movements. But here's the physical impossibility of it. The music is coming from a cheap, old-school computer speaker on the desk. Pute and Kina look at the speaker. The 3.5mm jack cable is dangling in the air.
Let's just pause on that for a second.
It is not plugged into a phone. It is not plugged into a laptop. It is physically disconnected from any source. And yet, the gamelan music is blasting at full volume.
I've tried to look at this from an engineering perspective. I mean, old capacitors and speakers can hold a charge for a few seconds. You might get a pop or a buzz after you unplug it. But to play a complex, high-fidelity audio track for a sustained period of time, that requires a continuous power source and an input source.
And Kina even pulls out her phone and records a video of it. They have proof.
Well, if we trust the narrator, and if we assume there wasn't some hidden Bluetooth receiver, which those old plastic speakers almost never had, then we have a problem. Physics says that shouldn't happen. If the cable is dangling, the circuit is open, there should be no sound.
Exactly. You can hallucinate a sound, but you can't record a hallucination on your smartphone. And you can't make a speaker play without a source. For me, this was the moment where the whole mass hysteria argument just crumbled.
It definitely leaves the biggest dent in the skeptical armor. It forces you to ask, what's more likely? That 3 women conspired to fake a video, or that something manipulated the electronics in the room.
And this all builds to the final climax, the war. The woman in room 2, the suspected Pesugihan practitioner, she suddenly confronts Diane. She hands her an envelope with 500,000 rupiah and says, "I know you know. Let's end this."
A bribe. Or maybe a peace treaty. She must have realized Diane's spiritual guardians were causing interference with her rituals.
Diane refuses the money, but later the money just appears in her room anyway, and then it vanishes into thin air. Diane tells the roommates, Tonight is going to be bad. Stay in your rooms, pray. And then she disappears.
And that night, the whole house just erupts.
Pute describes it as the sound of a market inside the hallway. A huge crowd of people running, shouting, stomping, and above all the noise, these screams of ampun, which means mercy in Indonesian.
The sensation of a crowd in an empty house is a very specific kind of auditory terror. It's just overwhelming.
They all huddled together, terrified. They thought they were losing their minds. They actually discussed if they were all developing schizophrenia. But the next morning, silence. The air felt lighter.
And the resolution is incredibly tangible.
The woman in room number 2 packs her bags and moves out immediately.
She's just gone.
Gone. Fled to Jogja or Semarang, they heard. The implication is that she lost. Her red bison and her entities were defeated by whatever Diane and this Barbara kingdom brought to the fight.
You know, skeptically, I could argue that the neighbor just moved out because she hated her noisy, hysterical neighbors. But the timing is just, it's uncanny. The war noises happen, and the very next day, the source of all the tension vanishes. It provides this narrative closure that feels almost too perfect, but it's what happened.
And what's left behind is this incredible bond between these women. Pute calls it the golden era of their friendship. Despite all the terror, or maybe because of it, they became inseparable. They would sleep in one room, just a pile of humans on mattresses to survive the night.
That's a classic example of trauma bonding. When you go through something that threatens your safety, whether it's a war zone or a haunted house, the people you survive it with become your lifeline. They're the only ones who can validate your reality. If Kina had been alone, she might have convinced herself she was going crazy. But because Pute heard it and Diane saw it, they stayed sane together.
It's a beautiful but really twisted kind of friendship. But looking back at all the evidence, the specific liddy sweeping sound, the white worm vomit, the bruises on Diane's head, and that impossible unplugged speaker, I just don't think stress is a big enough box to fit all that in. I think they really did walk into a battlefield.
I'm still stuck on the speaker. I really am. I can explain away the psychology of the group, but I can't explain the physics of that cable. That is the detail that will keep me up tonight.
And it raises a final kind of uncomfortable question for all of us, for you listening. We always think of our homes as our sanctuaries, right? We lock the doors to keep people out. But in Cipete, the threat was already inside.
And not just inside. It was ancient. It had a hierarchy, a whole kingdom. The humans were just temporary tenants.
Exactly. We assume we are the main characters of our own lives. But in this story, Pute and her friends were just ants scurrying across a battlefield where a red bison and a Christian kingdom were fighting a war that had absolutely nothing to do with them.
It is a very humbling and very terrifying thought.
So tonight, when you hear the floorboards settle, or you hear a weird hum from the other room, ask yourself, is it just the house settling? Or are you simply living in the middle of an invisible battlefield you weren't invited to?
Pleasant dreams, everyone.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you in the next one.